You're listening to Lifing Coast to Coast, the live stream podcast where we explore trending topics and personal development, wellness, and the art of lifing in today's ever-changing world. Join us every Saturday for insightful, relatable, and lively discussions that empower and inspire. I'm moderator Miki here with the co-hostesses with the mostesses, Dr. Lovey and Heidi. Hi, everybody. We are live. Welcome back to Lifing Coast to Coast, the podcast where we talk about all things lifing. It's so good to see some people here in our live studio audience, and we are also live streaming on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Feel free to check us out on all social medias, all podcast distribution sites, and check out our website, please, at lifing.services to make sure that you see what else we offer. And be sure that you're liking, commenting, interacting with us, and please share if you're enjoying this podcast. My name is Miki. I am your live stream moderator here, and I'm hanging out with my co-hostesses with the mostesses. We have Heidi and Dr. Lovey.
Hey.
Happy Love Month. Happy Valentine's Day was yesterday for us. So we did a special request of a repeat topic of attachment styles. So we're back again for a live deep dive. And before I pass it over to Dr. Lovey to chat more about the attachment styles and give us all a review in case you weren't here for the first one, I feel like we could talk about this topic forever and forever. And honestly, we could do the whole podcast every week on this, but we won't do that. We want to make sure that if you all are listening and you have extra questions that we didn't touch on last time, please put them in the chat. Please ask them now. If you haven't taken an attachment style quiz, I will drop that for everybody while Dr. Lovey is talking. And I personally started my little recovery journey a year and a half ago, and I took the assessment then, and I was avoidant dismissive. I took it again this week, and I got secure. So I think if there's one thing that everybody can take away from this week, it's that these attachment styles, if they are the others that are not secure, they don't have to be permanent. It doesn't have to be forever. You can grow and we can shift into more secure personality styles. So that is what we are trying to talk about today. Hey, could you please take us through a review of what the styles are?
Like we've talked about before, attachment is greatly influenced by our early bonding with our parents or our caregiver, right? So that relationship is highly predictive of how we might end up being attached to other people in our adulthood. But the relationship that we have with our first romantic partner a lot of times kicks in our attachment style. But that can evolve what our attachment style might have been in childhood, right? The other relationships that we have. So anyway, there are 4 attachment styles, like I've said before, and attachment is basically in everything we do as humans, right? So we're social beings, we're relational beings, and how we attach or don't attach with others is a major part of who we are. And Miki was saying, it's not necessarily a trait. There are some genetic things that go on and that are our makeup, right? And that's would be more of a trait. There's also states, and so that's why it can evolve and you can grow. So the 4 attachment styles are secure, ambivalent, anxious, preoccupied. So there's different names that are used for it. Sometimes you'll hear anxious, preoccupied. Sometimes you might hear ambivalent, but that's the same. It's the same exact one. And I'll tell you what they all mean. The third one is avoidant dismissive. And the fourth one is a mix. It's sometimes referred to as disorganized, sometimes it's referred to as fearful avoidant, sometimes it's referred to as anxious avoidant. And somebody with a secure attachment style, they're going to have a strong, secure attachment. They might have a higher emotional intelligence. They're going to be more capable of expressing their emotions appropriately, constructively, capable of sending and receiving intimacy or expressions of intimacy. They're going to have better boundaries. They're going to feel secure, whether they're alone or whether they're with somebody. And they're going to have a more positive view of relationships. And most people are not all of one of these, right? They might have a core style and lean in different ways. So just keep that in mind as well. Somebody with a secure attachment is going to be able to handle interpersonal situations with more ease. They're going to be able to solve rather than attack. There's a resiliency that you see there. All of these are resilient. It's a way of coping. Anxious, preoccupied, or the ambivalent style, they're going to look more needy in a relationship. They might have more stressors, whether they're real. They will manifest in different ways. Like I said, neediness, possessiveness. It can look like jealousy. It can look like control, but it's not necessarily that. It can look like mood swings. It can look like oversensitivity. It can look like obsessiveness to person on the outside, especially if the other person is avoidant, right, or dismissive. Somebody who is the anxious type or preoccupied ambivalent type, they're going to be more reluctant to give people the benefit of the doubt. They might have a tendency for more automatic negative thinking, and they're going to need constant stroking of love, validation, just knowing that they're accepted. They might respond negatively when they're not given that positive reinforcement. Sometimes it might look like they're drama oriented to somebody. And this is not putting on a label or to pathologize these types. This is a way of coping and a way of connecting with people that we've learned through relationships, especially the relationships that we had in early childhood. So they're going to want to have company, whether they want one person or a group of people. They struggle sometimes with just being alone. Okay. The dismissive avoidant style is going to be more self-directed and self-sufficient, independent, behaviorally and emotionally. They will, even though they want intimacy, they avoid it because it makes them vulnerable. And they also might avoid emotional obligations. I'm trying to think. There's this desire to have freedom physically and emotionally. They don't want to be on a ball and chain, so to speak. Sometimes their other priorities are going to supersede the romantic relationship. And it's not that they don't want the intimacy. It's just the way that they've learned to connect, right? They might have commitment issues. Some might prefer to be single. They may have a lot of acquaintances, but not the real close connections. They might look passive aggressive sometimes, and to some people, they might be perceived as having narcissistic traits, but it's not the same thing. It's just an attachment style. Then with the fearful avoidant, disorganized, preoccupied avoidant, however, they're all the same thing. This is a little bit more complex, and you don't see this attachment style as much, but it looks like it's associated with really challenging life experiences. If somebody's dealt with abuse, they've dealt with inconsistency, grief. So you see this desire to simultaneously resist intimacy and to desire intimacy and resist intimacy. That's the push pull. The I hate you, don't leave me. I love you, get the F out, right? There's that push pull. And there's a struggle with having confidence and relying on other people. There's a fear of the abandonment. A lot of these are based in that. So suspicion a lot of times will come up with dismissive. They look like they're needy at times, and then at times they're pushing people away. So that's basically it in a nutshell.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Hello, everybody on the live stream. I'm seeing one question here in the chat, and I wanted to open up if we have any other questions before we dive a little bit deeper. And we do have special guests here today. So I see something from Don. I'm going to read it. I think I'm secure, but I'm very dependent. I have no doubt that my marriage is strong and healthy, but I find I am really attached to him and terrified that something will happen to him. I feel that old familiar, I couldn't live without him. Is there an attachment style for that?
Yeah, it can be secure. You can be securely attached and lean into the more ambivalent and anxious, preoccupied style. That's typically what we are, depending on what relationship we're dealing with and how secure we feel in it and how our childhood attachments were, our early caregivers. We
And
can,
also, we can have different attachment styles depending upon that person in our life. We might be overall secure, but we might lean into other attachment styles at work with colleagues, for example, or with siblings or cousins or whatever. We can kind of cover those spectrums. And Miki, I thought maybe if you dropped the assessment in the chat, that Dawn could take it live. It doesn't take long. And then she could post what her results are if you want to, Dawn. Of course, you don't have to. And then we could play with it from there. Just a
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely have just dropped the attachment style quiz in the room. I've dropped it live as well. That was my thought too, that my attachment style sometimes differs depending on who I'm talking to, who I'm interacting with. And I also, I know a lot of it has to do with childhood growing up, but I also feel like my trauma and as I enter relationships in my young youth, I feel like that has to have maybe changed and created new levels of my attachment style. Or I'm wondering if the trauma, big life events could change someone's attachment style.
absolutely, absolutely. And a lot of times it is, like I said, those first romantic relationships. It can be a situation in school where you sit down at the lunch table and nobody wants to sit with you. Just things like that can impact how you attach with people. Yeah. And so, of course, trauma is going to threat response that we have in adverse situations. And the closer that we get to somebody is where our core attachment style is going to manifest the most. So,
And
when that familiarity sets in, those patterns are going to be more pronounced. And that's where the conflict or miscommunication might happen.
and taking it way back, everyone, a child's primary attachment style is formulated by the age of 2. And the most crucial period for attachment development that occurs during those first 2 years of life, where consistent and responsive caregiving from the primary caregiver, whether those are the parents or the nanny, sitter, uncle, whomever, that plays a key role in shaping that child's attachment style. When we think about babies up to age 2, their ability to get responsiveness out of their caregiver to provide them comfort during stressful situations, hungry, change my diaper, uncomfortable, in pain, whatever, baby cries, right? How long is their response time? And what is that comfort when they do get their needs met, right? And so that child develops like an internal sort of working model that influences how they perceive and interact with others in the future. And like we said, things can change, of course, over time. But for example, if you think back to my primary caregiver was not my parents. It was a woman who took care of me from 4 months old. And she was very responsive and very loving and amazing. And I don't think I would be where I am necessarily or who I am necessarily without having had this particular experience as a baby. I've maintained a pretty secure attachment style over my lifetime, although my parents were not responsive to my needs as I got older. So just throwing that out there.
Just really quick, when you were talking, Heidi, I went back to that thought of the epigenesis, which is the interaction between our makeup, our genetics, and what we've inherited, and then also our environment. And so there's this coaction that can happen, right? Let's say, for example, you have a child who is already anxious. Maybe they have, I don't know, like something going on like colic or whatever. And the a parent is dealing with, let's say, maybe postpartum depression or whatever. So you have already these factors, and then you have these other things that are happening at the same time. If the child is more difficult, the parent is, I give up, I can't deal with this or whatever. So you have different things that can happen like that. And you don't remember things before you're 2, 3 years old. So that stuff is just embedded in you.
Yeah. And the other thing to note is that this all takes place in our subconscious, everybody.
Yeah.
So it's not something that we're conscious of. People, before they take the quiz, they're like, wait a minute, I don't feel that way. I don't think that's me. And it's not necessarily you right now as you are, but it lives in your subconscious. And that's why we're taking a deep dive. Miki's right. We can't even cover all of this today because subconscious
Right.
reprogramming, that's a
Right.
thing.
And you were asking about trauma, Miki, and I don't know if it was on the live stream or not at that point, but you can have somebody who's securely attached, right? And then they end up becoming anxious after they are betrayed continually in a relationship. That happens all the time. And on the flip side, you can heal from trauma and can move toward a secure attachment. That's why I prefer saying that I lean towards this attachment style, but I'm moving towards a secure attachment. And we'll talk about the power of words later.
All right. So that was our intro, everybody. And as Miki said, we are going to be interviewing some guests today on our podcast. So I'm going to introduce to everyone here. We have Leigh and Keren joining us together. They are a couple, and I've worked with Leigh for about 2 years now. And part of things that we have been working on over the course of that time were past relationships and investigating past relationships in terms of one that she had previous to our working together and one that was ongoing during our early work together that ended, and this new relationship with Keren that started. And during this time, Leigh shared that she felt that she was emotionally unavailable and that she would never be able to have a healthy relationship. And through her concern and her determination, she began to take a deep dive on what that was by simply Googling, why am I emotionally unavailable? What does that mean? And how do I overcome it? And so she landed herself in a series of videos on attachment styles and learned her attachment style, which I'm going to let her share with you. And at the time that she did this deep dive, she had a brand new relationship with Keren. And what was really interesting about it was once she discovered her attachment style, she had something to be concerned about. Oh my God, this is my attachment style. I'm dating this person that I really like. Now what do I do? And I said, tell her about it. What? Tell her about my attachment style? Yeah, tell her about it. Tell her about it. And she's, that makes me so uncomfortable. And so I'm just going to set it up in that way and allow Leigh to tell you a little bit about her attachment style. And then we'll allow Keren to talk a little bit about hers. And then we'll ask some questions of them. And you'll learn firsthand the interaction between different attachment styles and how that can become healthy. So, Leigh, if you would kindly introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Hi, thank you, Heidi. Thank you. Yeah, so I learned that I'm a dismissive avoidant. I took an assessment and it made sense. I had these traits. It's what's so funny about it is that I thought I was the normal person and everybody else was crazy. Like, yeah, you take vacations alone. That's what a cool person does. Yeah. And why is everybody texting all the damn time? Why do I have to text them? I asked some friends when we started dating, is it normal for somebody to text you every day? And they're like, yeah. And it's just, there's so many traits like that. Don't like to plan things. And it comes back to just feeling trapped and not feeling free. And yeah, and the independence that I got as a child. I don't know, I'm talking too much. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have, Heidi.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to, I'm going to go to Keren now because I know that what you did was you went to Keren as I suggested, and you said, okay, here's what's going on. So, Keren, if you would introduce yourself, your attachment style, and what your response was to Leigh telling you about hers.
Thank you for having me. I'm Keren, and I started out definitely in my life anxious attachment. I'll just say briefly, I had a therapist years ago say something, there was something there with your mom, and we may not know what it is, but then I was sitting at Christmas one night and we were watching some movie, and this woman was a period piece and she was having a very loud, painful labor. And my mom was across the room and said, God, my doctor told me that's just not necessary. And I didn't make any of those sounds. And I sat there thinking, oh, there it is. And I realized that there had been this real lack of attachment, I think, very early on with my mom and other things, very conditional love based on a religious upbringing. So I think every person I have ever dated has probably been avoidant in some way, shape, or form. I definitely, my friends are all like, you have a type. They're all performers and very charismatic. But in my anxious attachment, I was looking for my self-worth in those people. These big personalities thought that I was worthy of being in their life. And there was something about me. And because I didn't have my own self-worth, that's where I found my worth. And so, certainly when I met Leigh, there were things that were ticking, like ringing the bell in the background of, oh, this is familiar. And oh, yep, been there before. But I think two things. I have done a lot of deep work to move from anxious to secure. And Miki, I love hearing you say that you're experiencing that shift. If I'm really honest, that's probably only happened for me and maybe even the last couple of years, like really finally moving into secure attachment. And I would say that's after 15 years of really hard work with a lot of support. So when Leigh shared and was extremely vulnerable with me, which I find really sexy, by the way, I I was like, oh yeah, okay. But that honesty and that vulnerability and the constant, Leigh's probably one of the most hardworking people I know in her life, but also on herself. So her willingness to show up and say, we had a conversation yesterday, and I said, the fact that you're not hiding this thing from me means everything. Just that I know what's going on allows me then, because really it's just about me making choices for myself. Does this thing work for me or not? And it's not personal. That I think that was the biggest transition for me over the years was learning who I am, developing my own self-worth. One of the things someone said to me years ago that was so perplexing at the time was mind your own business and have your own business to mind. And it was like my mind blew up because I had no idea what that meant because I had no business of my own. And now that I do, I can look at someone else's work and know that it's not personal, I guess is what I would say.
Thank you for that. Oh, this is really getting rich. Okay. To put you two in the driver's seat for a moment, because you have the awareness, the knowledge base, the personal experience, we do have a couple of questions from folks in the studio audience. And so I want to pose them to the two of you. And of course, we'll have the doctor weigh in as well. But here we go. As someone who is dismissive avoidant, if I feel even the smallest bit smothered or pressured in any way, I want to shut down and put walls up. This also happens if I get the needy vibe from someone. Are there strategies that I could use when I'm starting to feel this way that could help me work through this so that I don't end up pushing the other person away? And I'm going to say this first, and I'm going to have you both weigh in. The invitation to Leigh, remember, was to tell Keren about this attachment style and let her know. So go ahead, Leigh and Keren, go ahead and weigh in.
Yeah, I think that that's key, and it's hard work because when you feel like you need your freedom and you need to push back and that they're being needy, what's happening in your body, your nervous system is being activated and it feels like total anxiety. It feels awful, and you want to protect yourself from feeling that way. So the work that you have to do is hard because you have to lean into that and you have to know that you're going to feel those feelings. But the key is to be vulnerable. And just saying that word makes me sick. Sorry, my dog is acting crazy. But that is. I think of this now after I've done this work is you have a board game like Trivial Pursuit or something. And in the center of the board is secure attachment. And I've got my little piece and I'm learning and leaning in and getting closer and closer to that secure attachment. But sometimes I roll the dice and I have to go back or collect $200, whatever. I'm
Go to
mixing up my
jail.
games, go to jail. But yeah, that's the hard thing. And I went so deep into it that I was doing it all the time and it just made me sick. So I still, now that Keren knows about this, I can say I need some space or I need some time. And before I would have just taken it and not felt like I could tell anybody. But no, we're open, so I can do that.
Okay, so further to this question, Leigh, and I'm putting you in the hot seat here, and thank you for playing along. I also have a difficult time opening up and being vulnerable. It requires a considerable amount of effort. I understand that being vulnerable builds connection, so I try to force myself. Is this common with the dismissive avoidant attachment style? And what are some steps to overcome this? And does it get easier with practice? And we have some answers as well, but from a personal perspective, if you could weigh in on that.
It does get easier with time, and because you're leaning in and because you're being vulnerable, you become more attached to the person. And the more attached you are, the more you trust them and the more they trust you. So it has its rewards, if that makes sense. I don't know.
And does it
Can
go
I
ahead?
add something, Heidi?
Yeah.
And this is going to sound really simple and like a bumper sticker, which I seem to be talking in a lot these days. But I think the most beautiful thing is Leigh and I had this sort of instant connection and I don't know, like familiarity almost. And so what was really unusual for me and indicative also, I think, of this transition to secure attachment for me was this thought just popped into my head early on of trust the connection. And so even though there were moments where I was seeing that her going more silent or not knowing how to respond when I expressed emotion about something that wasn't necessarily about her at all, it was just about something in my life, I would just fall back on, okay, trust the connection. And I think I also appreciate, I saw someone saying, I feel uncomfortable just listening to them talk about this. And Leigh and I, may I talk about the beans really quickly?
Yeah.
So first of all, I also want to say that Leigh asked me early on to take the quiz. Sorry, we're dealing with animals here. So she asked me to take the quiz and I had anxiety about I was going to turn up anxious. And I was like, oh my God, look, I've made this progress in my life. So that was huge. But so we had this conversation early on when Leigh was trying, she always says she's not good with words and she's one of the most articulate people I know. But she was saying, I've hit a wall, or honey, I've run out of energy. So to the person who was saying, I run out of energy. And I had just watched this show and I won't get into the details, but someone had taught this young woman that before getting to a place of meltdown in her life, a tool that she could use was to carry a certain number of beans around in her pocket every day. And as her energy was being depleted by kind of her social battery, she would move beans to the other pocket. And so I said and then before she ran out of beans, she would try to go home, practice self-care, remove herself from the things that were depleting her. So I said to Leigh, it sounds like you're running out of beans. You run out of beans. And she was like, oh my God, that's it. So now early on, before she had more words, she would say, honey, I'm out of beans. Can we just be quiet? Or I need space. And I was like, awesome, because I knew, oh, I certainly don't want this person I love to melt down or be depleted. Or when it also was very clear, it's not about me. I think that's the thing when you move, when you can make that transition. And I'll be honest, I think we all go back and forth a little bit. Miki, you can probably relate, but it's really not personal. And that's the hardest lesson.
Yeah. And as I'm hearing you talk, and we're going to pass it over to Dr. Lovey to weigh in on this, but as I'm hearing you talk about this, both of you, it's like you are affording her the opportunity to become more secure by giving her tools because you recognize what it is that she's trying to uncover about herself and move through toward a more secure attachment. So this notion of being able to relate to each other in terms of the beans in the pocket is such a beautiful gift, really, to her. And then for her, being able to speak her truth. And so to the person that asked the question, it's clear to me that honesty is your friend. Speaking your truth in any relationship, though difficult, is one of the imperatives to closeness, and even in friendships, and can be in the workplace too. And this is not a workplace conversation per se, but it's asking to have your needs met. And you could certainly tell a coworker, I do not have the bandwidth for this today. We can pick this up at another time. I appreciate you giving me some space. There's nothing wrong with that healthy boundary like that in an inner working relationship as well. All right, I'm going to pass it back to Dr. Lovey so she can either weigh in or ask questions, whatever you want to do.
Hey, I just love that that there's that desire to grow and to want to connect, and I think that's the most important piece, the wanting to communicate. I was thinking about what dialogue would look like, and it sounds like you have reached that with each other. For example, with Keren, I know sometimes I need reassurance. It's because I care so much. When you don't respond, I feel rejected. I just need to know that you're here with me. And then Leigh responding because she's hearing this, Keren keeping it on herself and stating what she needs. Leigh being able to respond with, I don't always have the words, but I do care, right? When I pull away, it's not because I don't love you. It's because I get overwhelmed. And maybe we can find some middle ground and where I check in the beans. I ran out of beans, right? And then you can give me some space when I need it, right? And there's not a feeling of being attacked. There's not a feeling of having to be defensive. It's this is what I need. And because I care about you and you're telling me how you feel and what you need, I can find some middle ground here with our needs. And I love it. I think it's beautiful. I think it's a really great example to show that movement from having these insecure attachment styles that are opposite and then moving into a more secure relationship attachment style. So thank you for sharing that and just coming on here and being vulnerable.
Yeah, this is so powerful, this in real time perspective. So there's a follow-up question that I want to ask Leigh and Keren now, and then we can carry on from here. This is a good one. Is it okay to get into relationships before we have a secure attachment style? And if so, what would that look like? Here's a portrayal. So
This is
I think it's an experiment.
right? It is an experiment. Yeah. I started doing this work about the same time that I met Keren. So it just lined up that way. And no offense, but I had nothing to lose
It's
when
true.
we started because it
Yeah.
was a brand new
Yeah.
relationship. And Heidi,
Secure.
that's secure. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
And just be honest with her and see what happens. So if I were honest with her and said, I've learned this new thing about me, I'm dismissive avoidant, and I'm working on that. If she at that point said, I've been there, done that, I'm not going down that road, it would have been okay because it was brand new and there wasn't a lot of investment in it. That was our situation, and I can't speak to, I think the doctor would be able to say more about that, if it's bad or good or whatever, but that's my story.
I would also say I have a really dear friend who used to always say to me, it's information. So if you are doing that initial work and you're able to just say that, maybe that's all you can say, but you can express that, and the person says, sorry, not for me. First of all, will feel personal, but it's not personal. That's them making a choice for themselves. But second of all, it's information. Oh, not my person. Whoever can't be on this journey with me, knowing it's my journey and it's not about them, then great, move on. We get to move on. And I'm all in on someone who's doing the deep work. That's like I said, it's incredibly sexy, and I'm not wired to be with someone who's not doing that kind of work.
And Leigh has said this out loud, and I want to say it for the benefit of the person who is asking these questions, that this is hard.
Yeah.
That this work is hard. It's exhausting. As an avoidant, there were times when she wanted to avoid the work. Because it's hard, right? So knowing, everybody, that wanting to change things that live in your subconscious that started when you were 0 months old and evolved over your lifetime, that's a big deal. And it takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of stamina. You've got to be willing to hang in there through the times that are hard. But I think having both of you here today, and thank you so much for doing this, has given people a real bird's eye view of what this can look like. And so I don't know where we want to go now. Miki, do you have other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on something that I saw, that I heard, which was amazing. And as someone who is working away from the avoidant style, something that really helps me with trusting my partner, is being given freedom and being asked questions. And so when I saw Keren say, is it okay if I tell this story? And letting Leigh have the control and have the decide was so amazing to see. And that makes me feel more safe when people still give me some of my autonomy, give me choice. It was amazing. So thank
That's what you just said. Oh my gosh, that is so true. Just being able to have my autonomy and my independence, and for that other person to embrace that. It's great.
Yeah, we have someone on the live feed who was talking about their partner not being open to these deep discussions. And I know you were touching on that a little bit, Keren, just now, but they asked, do we need to tune into ourself and do all of our work and then share it, or can there be some sort of overlap?
Thoughts on that from me, and I know Dr. Lovey will have some as well. This is all about your personal journey to you. Learning your attachment style is for your own edification. What does this mean for me? For example, if you are anxiously attached, if you feel like this person is your everything person, that is a huge invitation to do the inner work, because you are your everything person. In order for you to be safe, happy, and fulfilled, that secure attachment piece is your ownership of your one precious life, right? And so, in particular, having a partner who's not, I don't do deep work. I don't do deep work. That's not my jam. And I have secure attachment style. My husband has secure attachment style, but he don't do deep work. I don't even bother with the deep work. It's not a thing. But we don't have that between us. If we had that between us, that would be a deal breaker, right? So I'm not suggesting to the person that posed that question that this is going to be a deal breaker in your relationship. All I am saying is that this journey is to you, and I've got some things I'm going to share later in the podcast that will getting yourself geared up, and the things that you can do to lean more toward being securely attached. And I know Dr. Lovey's got a whole other spin on this, I bet. So
No, I don't. I actually am right with you. Being in a relationship with another person who has an insecure attachment style, it definitely can make a rocky union and be out of sync. And when you are growing and learning about your own attachment style and trying to heal and become more secure, you want to include the other person, and you can grow as a couple, like we've seen here. And even in my own relationship, we grew as a couple. And however, you can't make anybody else change. All you can do is work on yourself as an individual and align yourself and connect with other people who have secure attachments. And going back to the other question that was asked about, can I be in a relationship before my style is secure? You certainly can. We've seen it happen. Finding people who have secure attachment can help to shift away from those negative patterns as well. And like I said, you can't change the other person. All you can do is model and grow in your attachment style and become secure and share the information with them. You can't force it.
So let's talk about the tips, the tricks moving towards being more secure with our expert secure coach.
All right, expert secure. You're,
That's what I'm calling it.
all right. Okay. There are 12 ways to build trust. All right. And one is being true to your word and following through on your actions. And the whole point of building trust is you want others to trust you such that you become trustworthy, you trust yourself. It's a real important aspect, right? So being true to your word, and Dr. Lovey mentioned this earlier, words are important. Say what you mean and mean what you say. And learning how to effectively communicate with others is so important, right? So it's lack of communication is the number one reason why relationships break down, not being able to communicate effectively. So communication style is big. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. We don't want to belabor any of this, but remind yourself that it does take time to build trust and earn trust. This is not going to be an overnight event, right? And give yourself time to make decisions. Don't act too quickly. Don't respond too quickly to people. If you really don't know the answer or you're uncomfortable with the question, say, let me think about that. Give yourself time and space. This is a process, right? And here's another thing. Value the relationships that you have. Don't take them for granted. Ask your bestie. Your bestie is going to tell you, oh, girl, you insecure. Your bestie's going to tell you that, right? Work it out with them. Talk through some of the things you're wanting to do to grow into a more secure attachment style. And if it's workplace stuff, everybody's on a team now at work, right? Develop your team skills. Participate only, not only openly. Ask for what you need and ask others to ask you for what they need. Get the open communication going in every aspect of your life. If you're working on your attachment style, don't just keep it tied to your partner or girlfriend, boyfriend, lover, whatever that is. Put it out there to your other people, right? And here's the thing. Always be honest with yourself. And it's that piece of it. This is all about building a trusting relationship. Build it with you. So don't hide your feelings. Do the right thing, what you believe in your heart. Do that. That's also building trust in yourself. Don't say, oh, sure, I'd be happy to, when the back of your mind is going, oh, hell no, I don't want to do that. Don't do that. That's not necessary, right? And this one's big. Admit your mistakes. Call yourself out. My bad. That also lends itself to others trusting you as well as you trusting yourself, which is a big part of this whole thing. All right. And real quick, the practical steps, and then we'll move on from this. But therapy, counseling, and coaching. Obviously, there are past traumas, unhealthy patterns. There's a lot involved in developing healthier relationship skills. So those modalities are important. Mindfulness, self-compassion, huge. Bring that to everything that you do and your life will be better. Mindfulness is talked about. It's a word that's ubiquitous, but it means something. And we're not doing a deep dive on this today. That will be a later topic, but it's one of the most important things. And self-compassion, the communication skills we touched on, building trust gradually. And this one, everybody, self-reflection. Journaling, audio or video diary, whatever that is. Oh my gosh, when we reflect on ourselves, when we look back and go, oh my gosh, this is back when I first met so-and-so. Look at this. Look at how different I am. Look at how far I've come. Writing it down, right? So those are quick things on a much broader 15-minute talk, but that touches us to what that looks like and how to move forward. Dr. Lovey, you want to weigh in on those aspects?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that you're saying. And I think the most important piece when we are trying to shift and just to being healthier generally and having a secure attachment style, it's really important to develop the relationship with yourself. And there is a reprogramming, and you talked about it earlier about the subconscious mind, and it's going to take reprogramming and how words are important. We talked about that. The way that we speak to ourselves is going to be really important. We have messages that maybe we didn't receive and that we look for outside of ourselves that are not going to satisfy us, because those messages need to come from ourselves in order for us to really get those messages. And we've talked before about the mirror work. And it's not just about affirmations. I always think about that SNL skit. You know what I'm talking
Even
about?
myself and people like me.
Right. I've said this before, that unless there is something more seriously wrong with me than what's already wrong with me, I can tell myself all day long that I am from the planet X, and just say that over and over, and I'm not going to believe it. And it's the same thing with affirmations. So it's looking at the messages that we didn't receive or that we need, whatever our core wounds are, whatever those, if it's not feeling worthy, or if it's being afraid that you're going to be abandoned, whatever the fear is, looking at the message that you need. And like I've said before, if you can't tell yourself those messages, you can use words like, it's possible for me to get this. It's possible for me to believe that I'm worthy. Or if you can't look at yourself and say those things in the mirror, you can put a picture of yourself when you were 4 years old, when you were innocent, next to you, and say those things to that little you, nurture that little you, and then connect that little you is you, and that you're giving those messages to yourself. That is what's going to be really important, saying those positive things to yourself, whether you can say it directly or like we said before, your brain only, don't run in the house. Your brain hears run in the house. So reframing it to walk in the house, right? Saying to yourself what what you need to believe. I'm safe and secure. Tapping works. Even though I'm anxious right now, I know I'm safe and secure. Messages like that. So that's really going to be the key to reprogramming, is giving yourself those messages, reparenting yourself. Look up inner child work. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a question here. I think this kind of relates a little bit. Do attachment styles impact our own relationships with ourselves, or do they only come
Absolutely.
into play with other people? Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There, because of those core beliefs, like I am not worthy of, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve to be connected. I'm not worthy of love, especially when we're talking about the disorganized type. There are some deep wounds there with all the types.
The most important relationship you will ever have is the one with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you have a fantastic relationship. I adore my husband. We have a great relationship. Last year, he traveled and worked out of the state for 9 months out of the year. I didn't miss him. I missed him in a weird way. Oh, you're not here, but I was fine. I was independent. I was carefree. I was doing my life. And when he came home, which he only came home 3 times in 9 months, we had a damn good time. And I went to visit him once. It was wonderful. But there was no pining. There was no, I'm not complete. There was no, I need my person. There was none of that. And it stems from me having to learn through a previous marriage that I was enough, because I didn't believe that I was, and I was insecurely attached to that person. And I recognized at the end of the day, and I was in my 40s then, I got me. This person is not there for me. And so if I don't have me, what do I have? Emptiness. So I got real clear on what I needed, and I did all the inner work. Oh my God, 4 years of therapy on myself. It was a dive.
You got you.
I have no regret. And that's cool. So
Yeah, I love that. There's a great question here on the live stream. It's one of my questions too. We don't talk about how pure honesty can hurt the other person. So what if the avoidance style is actually about trying to spare another's feelings? What would you say?
I'm going to hearken it back to speak your truth. Saying something that isn't true for someone else's benefit is not a benefit. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't say it with kindness. If you have to say something to someone that you know is going to hurt them, there is a way to say that with love. I'll use an absolute up close and personal experience today. My younger sister, who has early onset Alzheimer's, is living with my husband and myself because her husband is done with her. And every day that she wakes up, she wants to go home. She's sad. She misses him. And every day I have to tell her, he doesn't want you. But I have to say that in a way that she can hear it so that she can get on with her one precious life. And that is hard. And there's no really good way to say it, but she knows that I love her. She knows that I have her best interests at heart. You have to convey that to the person and say the hard things.
It's hard, but it's worth it for sure.
Yeah.
I think that it depends on if it's what the other person really wants to. You can be with somebody in a relationship and know that they really don't want to hear something. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with not giving them the message that they're not ready to hear.
I hear that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's always that. And some people will never be ready to hear some of the hard truths. The question is, can you live with it?
Oh, that's a good question. We have about 10 more minutes of this live stream. Phew. So, any closing thoughts? I dropped some resources in the chat. The book Attached by Amir Levine is the one. I have read it. I know Leigh has. Any closing thoughts before we open up for any Q&A here in our live studio audience? Dr. Lovey?
I'd like to just open up the Q&A, but I think that,
Yeah.
yeah. You have any closing thoughts, Heidi?
No, let's open it.
Okay.
I love you all so much. I feel like this is just the best, getting to talk about attachment styles all day with you two. So yeah, let us know. Feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions, or you can drop it in the chat.
Or if you want to share something about your own style.
Not, maybe we are learned. We have been learned. Yeah, I don't know. I think for me, I do have to consciously work on speaking my truth every single day. And it's about not feeling guilty if I don't say the whole thing, the entire truth, and just picking up the next day being like, okay, we're going to speak the truth all day and we're not going to avoid things. And also setting boundaries is huge.
I can appreciate that. I think that there has to be a balance there with certain things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'll be a balance. Hey, Jewel.
Hey, yeah, I just so I'm avoidant, but I do want to take the quiz again because I think I took it last in July. And thanks for the answers to those questions. That was super helpful. Something I was just thinking about is so I joined Bumble BFF because I'm trying to make friends in my community. I have a lot of virtual friends, new connections. So something that I'm struggling with, and I think it's a pretty common theme for me, is I find it really hard to break through the small talk and get into a deeper conversation. And I lose interest right away. And I haven't gone on the app for about 2 weeks. And I even got a notification saying someone's waiting to connect. But I just find it I don't know. I don't know how to break through it. And I know it has to probably do with my attachment style. And if I don't put in the effort, it's never going to go anywhere. But I'm just like bored and I don't know how to break through it. So that's what I'm putting out there. Please help.
Jules, I love this. This is a fiesta of opportunity to practice talking about this thing that you've learned about yourself.
Oh,
I
yeah.
know. But here's the thing about it. It's not even going to be a romantic connection. It's going to be a friend. We don't have time to waste doing the chitty bang. No, just look, I am working on my inner personal relationships. I have a hard time. I have an avoidant personality. And I'm trying to come out of my shell a little bit here. I'm trying to open up a little bit here. I don't want it. I want to bypass all that small talk. Speak your truth. You were able to speak your truth to us and say, ugh, the small talk, I'm bored. I can't with that. There is somebody else out there that's just going, oh my God, I'm on the Bumble BFF and the small talk is killing me. Someone is doing that, right? That's your person. And you guys can just bitch about it, which would be really fun. And then you can do the deep dive like Leigh did. And then you can guess what I found out about me. Just
I like that.
being super proactive in your own life. You've got to get
Cool.
through. Life begins at the edge of our comfort zone, everybody. It really does. I know.
I like that though. Yeah, I think I'll try it. I have to really make myself even go on there because it's just, yeah, it's a bit uncomfortable. But yeah, maybe I'll just keep it real. Thank you.
Yeah. And real quick, I saw this in the chat and I want to ask Dr. Lovey. Dawn asks, I wonder if my answers regarding my parents skewed the results because my answers for my parents were the exact opposite of those for my husband. So she got anxious, insecure. So thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know if it necessarily skews the results, but it's going to show up as that there may have been this, whatever, anxious, avoidant, attached, or whatever, an insecure attachment style as your core as a child that you got from your caregiver, and that it can show up. And so I think that is important to know. Okay, I have a secure relationship with my husband, and if I'm feeling hungry or if I'm really tired, I haven't slept in a while, my defenses are down, am I going to lean, or if I'm whatever's going on in the relationship, which way am I going to lean? And a lot of times the lean will be with whatever that childhood attachment style might
Yeah.
have been.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's the love that was learned is not necessarily the love that you have right now. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. And remember, Dawn, it lives in your subconscious. So it's there, like Dr. Lovey is saying, it's a go-to, right? So if your first pass at things was what your parents gave you, when you're tired, when you're angry, when you're feeling insecure for whatever reasons, you're not going to feel secure. You're probably going to go to your hubby and go, wait a minute, why are you not? You might have a moment, as we say, right?
Yep. A moment.
Leigh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that to the person who asked about which relationships you were referencing when you take the quiz, I paused when I took the quiz and asked myself, oh, am I answering this just based on past relationships, romantic ones? And I made a conscious choice to look at all of my current relationships, meaning all of my friendships, all of the people that love me most. And because those are the most valid relationships actually of my life, they're the ones I've worked the most hard at. And if I'd looked at my past relationship, that quiz would have been
I think what she's referencing, Keren, is there is a big long section in the beginning of the quiz that she's taken today that asks about parents, mother, then father. So
I do remember
foundationally, you remember those. So those foundational
Yeah.
questions, yeah. But that's valid. Yeah. If you look at the spectrum of all your relationships for the questions below mom and dad, lower down in the quiz, then yeah, that's a good reference point.
I think it helped me not to get stuck on the romantic, like limiting my experience to my romantic choices in past, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, totally.
Robinette. Hello.
Hi there. I just took the test yesterday, and what I'm hung up on is the questions, because both of my parents are deceased, one for 25 years and one for 10. I had a hard time differentiate when answering those questions because I would think back, okay, how I look at my relationship with my mother, how I responded. I've grown since 25 years. And I find in my mind, I think I was switching back and forth between answering back then at that time how our relationship was, but thinking in the now, because I'm different, that my answers, my reflection of that time is different. And I don't know if I'm making sense, but I guess I'm thinking when I was 40 years old, my relationship would be different than being 62 years older. I don't know. The question's geared towards my romantic relationship is easy to judge and to answer because it's the here and now. But I guess I don't know that I'm going to get a clear, real, true scoring.
Did you take the questionnaire from the perspective of when you were a little kid? Little kid, not in your 40s, little kid.
Oh,
When you were a little
I should
kid,
redo it.
what was life like when you were a little? You know?
Okay, thank you for that. I guess I don't read directions enough, but yeah, I'm going to redo it because I think that will make it easier and I'll understand it better.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank
It's
you.
it's about the formative years, the foundational years, right? So what you remember as a little,
Right.
and then it's mother, father, and then spouse. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Good.
Oh, it just made me think about, when I started looking into this and it was talking about what happened is when you were a child and your caretakers and their nurturing style and all that. I'm an only child and so close to my parents. They're passed now, but in my mind, we had an ideal family, ideal relationship, and lots of love, lots of affection, and all that. And so I thought this can't be the situation because there were no problems when I was a kid. So when I was taking the quiz, were your parents there for you? Did they support your dreams? All that kind of stuff. And I was like, yeah, they were there for me. But then it said, were they physically there?
Mhm.
And that's when I went, oh, because they both had their own businesses. They were in retail. They had their own thing going on. Plus my mother was involved with community theater and my father was like on the board of whatever. Anyway, they were busy all the time. And somebody raised me as well, Heidi, like you, and they weren't physically there a lot. I I had fun in my room pretending I was David Cassidy and playing with Barbies and stuff, but I don't remember being sad about it. But the truth is they weren't physically there, so how could they have supported my emotional needs if they literally weren't there? So that was that blew my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. As parents and most parents, nobody wants to have a child with attachment stuff, right? So we do the best that we can as parents. And sometimes there's things that happen, like having to go to work and having to put your child in daycare or dealing with your own stuff that you're dealing with. And if they weren't there physically, like you were saying, or maybe you had a parent who was there, was present, but they were critical, or maybe they didn't validate your feelings, or there's so many variables that can happen, and it's going to impact. And again, of course, that personality piece that comes in, know what to expect, right? When you're younger, then you're a lot of times, again, like I said, we're going to try to repeat these patterns, and because we're trying to correct them.
And I said earlier in the podcast that when I was little, before going to kindergarten, I had this woman who was amazing, who took care of me. After that was up until 5, 6 years old. And after that, my youngest sister was born when I was 8 years old. At that point, I was parentified. My older sister and I were getting up in the middle of the night. We were feeding the newborn. We were sterilizing bottles after school. We were packing lunches. We were taking care of our 2 younger siblings. I was given a ton of responsibility. So I became fiercely independent. I could take care of myself and everybody else around me. Never, ever being seen as a child that needed anything, not supported in any way. That beginning was very secure. And then later it got turned on its ear in a way. So those stages of development evolve and change over time. And I put all of my eggs in my school basket. That became my family. Those teachers became my mother. I couldn't wait for September to get a new mommy. That was my favorite time of year. It was a huge part of my developmental attachment style because I attached by sitting in the front of the room, raising my hand, being smart, getting it right. And every teacher loved me because I was a teacher's pet all the way through my senior year of high school in 1977. It's literally in my yearbook, my picture. Okay, talk about insecure.
Me too.
That's okay. You know, we all got what we got. We all didn't get what we didn't get. And we're all here figuring it out. So
I just want to take time before we close the live stream to thank Leigh and thank Keren for being here and for letting us into your lives. And thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Dr. Lovey. And thank you, everyone in the studio audience, for being here. Please make sure you're following us on all social media and check out our finished podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. And please check out our website. It is lifing.services, and we will see the live stream later. Bye bye.
thanks, everybody. Thanks, Miki.
Thank you for listening to Life Being Coast to Coast. Join us every Saturday for insightful, relatable, and lively discussions that empower and inspire.